Have you ever waited for something God promised and the waiting felt longer than you expected? At first, you trust Him, you believe His word, but as time passes, doubt begin to whisper. So you start to wonder if probably this needs your help, you know, or maybe you should step in and make things happen yourself. But what happens when we move ahead of God instead of waiting for Him? Welcome back to another devotional reading. Thank you so much for taking this journey with us as we continue to read through the book Christ Triumphant. The topic for today is Abraham's failure of faith can serve as a warning to us. And the scripture reading comes to us from Genesis chapter 21, and we will read verse 14. And it reads, "And Abraham rose up early in the morning, and took bread and a bottle of water, and gave it unto Hagar, putting it on her shoulder, and the child, and sent her away. And she departed and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba." And now let's turn to today's devotional reading. Abraham had accepted without question the promise of a son, but he did not wait for God to fulfill his word in his own time and way. A delay was permitted to test his faith in the power of God, but he failed to endure the trial. Thinking it impossible that a child should be given her in her old age, Sarah suggested, as a plan by which the divine purpose might be fulfilled, that one of her handmaidens should be taken by Abraham as the secondary wife. Polygamy had become so widespread that it had ceased to be regarded as a sin, but it was no less a violation of the law of God and was fatal to the sacredness and peace of the family relation. Though it was at Sarah's earnest entreaty that he had married Hagar, she now reproached him as the one at fault. She desired to banish her rival. But Abraham refused to permit this, for Hagar was to be the mother of his child, as he fondly hoped, the son of promise. The scripture says, when Sarai dealt hardly with her, she fled from her face. Hagar made her way to the desert, and as she rested beside a fountain, lonely and friendless, an angel of the Lord in human form appeared to her. He bade her, "Return to thy mistress, and submit thyself under her hands." As a perpetual reminder of his mercy, she was bidden to call her child Ishmael, which means God shall hear. When Abraham was nearly 100 years old, the promise of a son was repeated to him, with the assurance that the future heir should be the child of Sarah. But Abraham did not yet understand the promise. The birth of Isaac, bringing, after a lifelong waiting, the fulfillment of their deepest hopes, filled the tents of Abraham and Sarah with gladness. But to Hagar, this event was the overthrow of her fondly cherished ambitions. By this time, Ishmael was now a youth who had been regarded by all in the encampment as the heir of Abraham's wealth and the inheritor of the blessings promised to his descendants. Now he was suddenly set aside, and in their disappointment, mother and son hated the child of Sarah. The general rejoicing increased their jealousy until Ishmael dared openly to mock the heir of God's promise. Sarah saw in Ishmael's turbulent disposition a perpetual source of discord, and so she appealed to Abraham, urging that Hagar and Ishmael be sent away from the encampment. The instruction given to Abraham touching the sacredness of the marriage relation was to be a lesson for all ages. This is the end of today's reading, and it helps us understand why waiting on God can sometimes feel so difficult. You see, Abraham believed God's promise. The problem was not that he doubted God's power. The problem was that the promise seemed delayed. And as the years passed, the situation began to look impossible. Sarah was growing old, and the child God had promised had still not come. So they tried to help God fulfill his promise in their own way. But what seemed like a solution actually brought pain, jealousy, and division into the family. This story reminds us that waiting on God is not always easy. When answers are delayed, it can feel as though nothing is happening. Yet, sometimes God allows those delays to test our faith and to teach us to trust His timing. Even though Abraham made a mistake, God did not abandon His promise. In time, Isaac was born exactly as God had said. And that reminds us of something very important. Our impatience can create difficulties, but God is still faithful to His word. So the question for each of us today is this: when God's promises seem delayed, will we trust His timing, or will we try to take matters into our own hands? Often the safest place for us is simply to let God lead. So as you listen to the closing hymn, guide me, O thou great Jehovah. Let it be a prayer in your heart today that the Lord will guide your steps, strengthen your faith, and help you trust His timing even when the path ahead is not yet clear.
Guide me, O thou great Jehovah, pilgrim through this barren land. I am weak, but thou art mighty. Hold me with thy powerful hand. Bread of heaven, bread of heaven, feed me till I want no more. Feed me till I want no more. Open now the crystal fountain, whence the healing waters flow. Let the fiery cloudy pillow lead me on my journey through. Strong deliver, be thou still my strength and shield. Be thou still my strength and shield. When I tread the verge of Jordan, bid my anxious fears subside. Bear me through the swelling currents, land me safe on Canaan's land. Songs of praises, I will ever give to thee. I will ever give to thee.